Hello ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in to Crashy News, where we bring you the latest in Crash Bandicoot news and updates. As usual with our top ranking videos, we go back into the history of Crash Bandicoot to tackle the most interesting tidbits and facts that you might have not known before. As you saw in our Japan-centric video in regards to things that become a staple of the franchise down the line. As it's been a few weeks since the release of the latest game, Crash Bandicoot 4 is about time. We thought it would be a great opportunity to take a look back at the most obscure side of the franchise, with none other than its own video games. In this video, we will be exploring Crash's little-known titles that we think are interesting to look at, and perhaps understand their quirks and story. So without further ado, let's jump right in!
Number 5.
In late 2002, the Rafa Cortex was finally released on the Nintendo GameCube, many months after the Xbox version and almost a whole year after the original release on the PlayStation 2. Perhaps to make up for the delay, Universal was looking to utilize one of the GameCube's unique features, its connectivity with the Game Boy Advance via the link cable. That's how we got Crash Bandicoot Blast, developed by Vicarious Visions, who at the time were already developing the huge adventure, also on the GBA. It's essentially a shooting gallery minigame where you could use the fruit bazooka to shoot pictures of your foes that jump and slide around the screen to earn points. But avoid shooting pictures of your friends or you'll lose points. Get enough points and you move on to the next round as targets move progressively faster. There was another Crash minigame playable on the Advance, Crash Party USA. It too was accessible through link cable connectivity with the GameCube version of Crash Nitro Kart, but you could also access it by holding L and R when booting up the Game Boy Advance version of Nitro Kart as well as Spiral Orange. It is essentially a rhythm game where you make Crash boogie down by pressing the right button props at the right time when they slide behind the green circle, and sometimes you'll have to switch tracks with the D-pad. There is a variant accessible in Crash Bandicoot Purple which replaces Crash when Spyro the Dragon, thus called Spiral Party USA.
Number 4.
The Game Boy Advance wasn't the only time you get to unlock a Crash minigame by connecting a handheld device to a home console. Back in the late 90s, when the PS1 reigned supreme, Crash was at its highest point of popularity, even in the land of the rising sun. And during those days, Sony was experimenting with memory cards. Competing with the similar visual memory unit for the Sega Dreamcast, Sony released the Pocket Station in 1998 in Japan. It doubled both as a memory card and as a small interactive handheld to play minigames and applications downloaded from compatible PS1 games. This included Ape Escape, Ridge Racer Type 4, and even the first two Spyro games. Final Fantasy VIII is even one of the few games where Pocket Station functionality remained present in the Western releases. Sadly, this wasn't the case for Crash Bandicoot 3 Warp, which only had Pocket Station support with the Japanese version. The minigame you get to transfer to the Pocket Station can essentially be boiled down as a virtual pet simulator, where Crash himself is the pet. You get to interact with him and play various activities such as dancing sessions, boulder chases, and solving some kind of jigsaw puzzle, all to collect photos of the Bandicoot.
Number 3.
You may be aware of the Bandicoot's dive into the mobile gaming scene, soon returning to it with Crash on the Run. One notable example we would like to talk about is Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D, the first Crash mobile game to properly feature polygonal 3D graphics. This game is a weird mishmash of elements from various Crash works. The gameplay is very similar to the original CTR with the power sliding for tight turns, gaining a speed boost from big jumps, and it features a lot of the same items. But the tracks all share the same exact layouts and aesthetics from the ones in Crash Tag Team Racing, albeit with minor alterations to better fit the gameplay style. The cast also feels like a mishmash, with Crash, Coco, and Cortex using their Titans designs, while Dingodile and Polar lean towards their Naughty Dog designs, though they are not held by the wonky 3D modeling. Also, yes, it was one of the first appearances of Yaya Panda. Now, Nitro Kart 3D in itself isn't that obscure. It was one of the most popular iPhone apps at the time. But what if we told you it got a home console release? Introducing the Zeebo, an all-digital gaming system specifically tailored for emerging markets such as Brazil and Mexico. It bragged about being these countries' first exposure to popular games and franchises featured in its library, such as Resident Evil 4, Quake, and EA Sports FIFA. But they all turned out to be ports of mobile phone games, which most were already highly downgraded ports of their original counterparts. Hence why Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D was featured among them. But hey, if you considered Zeebo in the same league as the Wii or PS3, then we could count Nitro Kart 3D as a home console entry in the Crash franchise, right? Right?
Number 2.
Let's keep up with Crash on mobile by introducing an entry we're sure you haven't heard of before, as it was exclusively made for a very specific brand of mobile phone. We're talking about Chokan Crash Bandicoot, literally translated into Crash Bandicoot Intuition, released in 2007 for the Docomo SH904i. It is a pseudo-sequel to the critically acclaimed Crash Boom Bang, released the previous year on the DS, as it shares the same graphical style and focus on minigames, but instead of using a touchscreen, it utilizes the phone's motion sensors to complete the minigames. Some examples include include tilting the foe sideways to slalom, swinging the phone around in circles to throw the hammer, and free fall by tilting the phone in the direction you want. Unlike Boom Bang, Chocom never left the Japanese shores, as the Docomo phone itself didn't either. But if this mobile game had much effort put into it as a DS original, we don't think it's a big loss. Before we move to the number 1 spot, we like to enumerate some honorable mentions. First are the mobile adaptations of Crash Twinsanity. One's in 2D and is solely based on the Dock Amok segments where you guide Cortex away from various hazards, and the other attempts a third-person 3D perspective, mimicking the original gameplay more closely. There are also various official web browser games working through Flash or Shockwave developed by E-Zone and Candy Stand, a few of which were recovered by @Tomy Shadow. These include Crash Ball, Crash Out, and Crash Evaders from E-Zone, as well as Crash Nitro Mini Golf, the only remaining Flash game from Candy Stand. And then there's Crash Village, the official Crash website during the Titans era, which also acted similar to a social MMO. In addition to news and info about current games, you could create your own avatar from various character parts, interact with other users, and take part in minigames and various activities.
Number 1.
I'm sure you're familiar with these things. Little handheld games with microchromatic displays, piercing sound effects, and archaic shallow gameplay that were so cheap to produce that they were at one point given away as Happy Meal toys. Crash Bandicoot had a hefty number of these dedicated handhelds produced across the franchise's history, but we chose to focus on one particular electronic game that had a major resurgence among the fanbase recently. This device is among a series of handhelds referred as 99X games, produced by Tiger, and featuring a dot matrix screen which allowed for more sophisticated visuals. What makes this crude electronic game stand out more than it has any right to be is that it's featured its own story, settings, and enemies, all of which are horror themed. It's about Crash trying to retrieve a golden treasure that's used to belong to a now deceased Mr. Crumb, an avaricious old man. You run forward as you dodge obstacles left and right and spin enemies away through 4 different spooky areas. Each area has a guardian: the Thorn Thing, a tree-like monster, Grumbler the Mummy, Digger the Skeleton, and finally, the ghost of Mr. Crumb himself. This obscure piece of circuitry would have been completely phased out of Crash's history if it wasn't for some really dedicated fans. Special shout out to DannyQ94 for shining a spotlight on it. Danny Q reached out to developer George Fergan for an interview, who even drew out his own sketch of Mr. Crumb. There were even several requests from fans to include Mr. Crumb as a playable racer in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fuel. While it didn't happen, it didn't go unnoticed either. When the upcoming Crash Bandicoot On The Run was officially revealed after a small launch in select areas, Steven Jarrett, creative lead at King, confirmed in an interview that Mr. Crumb will be among the many bosses to be eventually included. Who would have thought that a villain from some crummy LCD handheld could ever make a second appearance? Well, that's the power of the internet and a passionate fanbase. That's all we have for today. We hope you liked the story. If you did, be sure to leave a like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel to keep up with future updates. For more regular coverage, visit the Crashy News website and follow us on social media. You could also support us directly by leaving a donation on our Ko-fi page. Links in the description below. This is Crashy News, signing out. Have a good day.